Welcome to the Spring 2013 I for Energy Seminar Series. A special welcome to those viewing from the Davis, Merced, and Santa Cruz campuses, as well as other viewers of the webcast. I'm Carl Brown, Deputy Director of the California Institute for Energy and Environment, and I have the distinct honor of introducing today's speaker, UC Berkeley's Director of Sustainability, Lisa McNeilly. Perhaps I was selected to introduce Lisa today because I know a little bit about sustainability and energy policy by the UC system. So I'll go out on a limb and say that when you consider its size, policy leadership, and wide-ranging achievements, the 10-campus UC system has a legitimate claim to being the world leader in higher education sustainability. Now, please remember that I'm affiliated with the entire UC system. So you will not hear me say that Berkeley is the most sustainable campus.
Thank you.
But it is true that Berkeley provides important leadership within the UC system. I've worked with Lisa and watched her create that Berkeley leadership in two activities that are not in her posted bio. Lisa was manager of the design team for the Operational Excellence Energy Management Initiative and is now co-chair of the new Richmond Bay Campus Joint Sustainability Committee. A common theme for both these activities is transparency. And I would say that Lisa's contribution to Berkeley and Berkeley's sustainability leadership role within the UC system are defined by that transparency. Like all of you, I'm looking forward to getting a new window on Cal from Lisa's talk, Sustaining a Green Campus. So please join me in welcoming Lisa McNeilly.
So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Carl, for those very kind words that UC Berkeley is the leader in sustainability worldwide. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. I want to start at what might seem an odd place, which is back in the 1970s. So I was in elementary school, and it's kind of where I became an environmentalist. This was the era of a lot of major national legislation. The Clean Air Act was in place, and I remember my mother writing letters to try to get the coal-fired plant that was upwind from us to put on scrubbers, and them replying that they would offer to wash our car twice a year instead of scrubbers. I remember this was the time of the Endangered Species Act, and I remember being old enough to follow the controversy over the snail darter and the Tellico Dam, which was less than an hour from my house, and being somewhat disillusioned, actually, with the federal legislative process over that, where the Supreme Court had said, yes, you have to protect it, and our local representatives passed a bill that said, no, we don't really want to. It was also a time when the condor population was down to 22, and they pulled all of those in, and I remember going to school and seeing a film where they had a human puppet. Has anybody seen that film? The puppets feeding the condor chicks? Yeah. So I graduated from elementary school. I got a math degree. I did a lot of different things in the environment. I've lived overseas working on various issues for the federal government, for nonprofits. And then I went back to the Grand Canyon in my first sustainability job. And 2 years into it, I got to be part of a condor nest watch program where we watched this 9-year-old male condor become the second condor to fledge in Arizona in over 100 years. It was a powerful experience for me. I remember seeing him in the nest cave, in the cave where he was a nest. But what was most impressive to me was the team of volunteers who did this. We created a community of sustainability around this bird with a 10-foot wingspan. There were volunteers who came in, who took their vacation time just to come in and spend a week, becoming citizen biologists, citizen scientists to provide data for birds. And that community of sustainability is something that I'm also working on here on campus. I think it's an important aspect to what we do in addition to the technical work. So something else that's also staying in the 70s, these are some pictures of some different light switch stickers on campus. The one in the top left is copyrighted 1973. I share this because there's some interesting different approaches to the behavior change here. You have straightforward. You go to, giving a phone number, down to humor, graphics, and then the far bottom right, my right, no, you're right, yeah, are the stickers that we have now. But it's to get at this concept of that in a community of sustainability, you have resilience and you have permanence of this behavior change, and how much we have to do to ensure that that happens. But you also have to make sure that you first have a green campus, that you've put in place programs that are transparent, that institutionalize the change, and that do create this resistance. So how do we know we're green? There are a lot of people out there that want to tell us what they think about whether we're green. There are reporting requirements, there are ranking systems, there are rating systems, and we as sustainability professionals do want to communicate about our progress, the status of our goals and our projects, because we think that transparency makes us and keeps us greener and more sustainable. So how do we do that here at Berkeley, besides participating in some of these ratings and rankings? We publish our own report. We're on our 5th year of a campus sustainability report. We do this for a lot of reasons. We want to hold ourselves accountable to the goals and the progress that we've set. We want to be complete and accurate, to try to conform to protocols and to provide clarity, and also to make sure to throw out, remember back when I said I was a math major, one of the things I'm concerned about is to make sure that we report orthogonal variables, so that instead of reporting 3 different variables that all represent the same kind of work that sort of says in 3 different ways, yay, we're great, we'll sort of report the one. So we have maybe a smaller number of variables in here than in some other places, and I want to share some of those with you today. Starting with energy and climate. So when the campus sets goals, we set our goals for sustainability over a number of years. And we have some goals are what I call uppercase G goals, and some are what I call lowercase g goals. This is an uppercase G goal. We did a 2-year study, or a 1.5-year study on the feasibility. We had to get the Chancellor's approval. It cost a significant amount of money to do this, and we needed broad campus buy-in. So we needed a big goal for this. And we set a goal, 1990 levels by 2014, which is 6 years faster than the state requires. And we're doing pretty well right now. Last year we saw almost a 4% reduction in our emissions. To be fair, this was partly because PG&E, who provides us our electricity, is on track to meet their 33% RPS goal, and so the carbon embedded in that electricity they provided us went down. But we also have seen other reductions as well. So these are some of the other details. This is not in the sustainability report, but this is what we report to third parties who verify our inventory. You can see that steam and electricity are our largest 2 sources. Together they're about 70%. In total, 80% of our emissions come from buildings. Air travel comes in a surprising third. It's another area where our emissions were down last year. They're down, sort of both air travel in general and our emissions in total are down lower than they've been since 2006. And we flew 2,700 fewer trips last year. We're in 2011. I guess we're now kind of 2 years ago, too. We haven't done the most recent inventory. And so these are all part of what we report. But I'm sure this is a crowd that cares about how we did this. So because 80% of our emissions were in buildings, I think a lot of you are familiar with the Strategic Energy Plan. This is a summary of that program here for the campus that we're putting in somewhere over $20 million to get about $4 million in savings a year and about 17,000 tons. To give you perspective, the total here for last year was 183,000 tons. We're trying to get down to 163. So this 117 is a nice chunk of that reduction. Again, I think we're doing some fairly standard categories of projects with lighting, monitoring-based commissioning, which I sometimes refer to as tune-ups when I give this presentation to a less technical audience, and then HVAC retrofits. So I wanted to walk through one of the buildings that we've done so you can see the whole scope of the approach that we've done. So this was This was for Barrows Hall. This was a tune-up or a commissioning project that we did in Barrows. This project only cost us about $175,000. With the payback from the utility, the payback with the rebate from the utility was less than a year. We essentially went in, optimized the HVAC operating schedule, some fairly basic work, replaced some motors, put in some BFDs, refurbished economizer dampers. And you can see fairly immediately the impact that this had on our electricity use and on our steam use when this happened. It's great to be able to visualize that energy. But we went one further in Barrows. I'm going to talk a little bit more about a more recent behavior change campaign Carl mentioned with the Energy Management Initiative. So we were in the same building. We had a professor notice that use had gone up. I think you can see that bump up in that graph. And it stayed up. He emailed us. The new energy office, which had not been around for very long, fixed the problem, and it dropped back down. We estimated that was $45,000 from this outreach campaign. So in total, we've saved over $100,000 in Barrows Hall by combining this infrastructure and behavior approach. I also just want to highlight, again, as a little bit of precursor to this talk about the behavior campaign, how much nicer this graph is than the other one in terms of readability and understandability. So we also report on other things, including some related to energy, some not. I'm going to go through those, even though I know you all are an energy crowd. LEED buildings. We have 10 around campus. They represent 7% of our total square footage. They're all, I believe, new construction or commercial interiors at this point. And it's we have, I think, at least 11 more in the pipeline. Transportation. This is sort of more what I call a lowercase g goal. We were already making progress on this. The department was interested, and we worked more directly with the folks who oversee our commute and our fleet vehicle use to set this goal, more as a way to kind of bring them into that process. But it wasn't one where we needed quite as much of the support, so hence the lowercase g. But this goal is in terms of fuel usage, which may be a little surprising. I think most of the time when we talk about transportation, we talk about drive-alone rates. And that's actually usually a question that I ask a group, which probably just isn't as helpful in a situation where we're being videotaped here. So what people think the drive-alone rates are. And it is interesting. Student drive-alone rate is only 6%. For faculty and staff, it's 43%. And between those rates having come down since 1990, between people driving more efficient cars, driving them less, us reducing the number of fleet vehicles, we've reduced the fuel use that we use in commute and fleet by over 30% since 1990. And I like to measure that because that's the what that we're trying to do. We care about how much fossil fuels we're burning. I came to that realization when I was presenting to a class, and the professor goes, "So Lisa, do you really not care if somebody carpools in a Hummer as opposed to driving alone in a Prius or an electric car?" And he's right. Drive-alone rates matter because that's what people can visualize. People can understand driving alone versus carpool versus transit. It's a planning tool for how many parking spaces you need. But fuel use is where we're lessening or increasing our impact on the environment. Water is another area where we had an uppercase G goal. And this one we did slightly differently than greenhouse gases. We still did a feasibility study, but it was a smaller scale. The financials are much weaker in water. The cost of the project are much more closely equals the savings that you're going to see. So it's harder to pitch this as an investment in campus in the same way that energy work is. We've still seen reductions. Total water use dropped almost 4% last year and is down over 8% since 2008. It's down even more since 1990, which may seem, how did we do that? We did that a lot of ways. We did that by reporting leaks faster, by fixing leaks, by automating our irrigation system. 90% of our irrigation systems are automated and connected to a weather station now. But we did this even though we've increased the amount of housing on campus. We have significantly more dorm rooms. Residence halls account for about 25% of this water use. And so even in all of those changing demographics of that, we've still been able to see this reduction and are committed to keeping moving it down. Waste. Sometimes this is often the area where I get the most questions about. This is actually a long-standing goal to hit zero waste by 2020. This is one of the goals set for the whole UC system. It's an area where we are really increasing our efforts on this. Our students are very interested in us doing this. Our diversion rate, those numbers that you see on the top include construction and demolition waste, which is an important number to include. But the construction that we do and how much waste we can divert varies very dramatically from year to year. And so we also make sure that we calculate the diversion rate just for the municipal solid waste, because that's what most people think of. And for that number, we're at 46%, which is a 5 percentage point increase in just 1 year, which I hopefully means, and I hope we plan to continue to be on that trajectory as we improve recycling, add composting, and work on some of the upstream purchasing issues that can affect our waste. This middle photograph here I want to talk about, because I mentioned student interest in waste. We have a reuse program on campus that works on a lot of different fronts. And one of the things they've been doing recently is working with construction projects or major moves to help reuse equipment instead of just throwing away furniture or the stuff that gets left behind when people leave a building. So this was a pile of old chairs at a Marchant building that they helped divert a few years ago. More recently with Campbell Hall, in one weekend they were able to divert 14 tons of waste by finding somebody else to reuse it on campus as opposed to throwing it away. And so the students have been extremely valuable partners with the campus on this aspect of sustainability. So one of the last areas that we talk about in sustainability is purchasing. In this case, food purchasing. We also look at other purchasing, but it's we don't quite have the data streamed in a very accurate way right now, looking at how much sustainable food is purchased on campus. And again, there's a system-wide goal of 20%, and we're at 24%. And kind of static right now. I'm hoping we can further increase that. But expanding the community of sustainability also means it also takes into account how well you communicate. And this was something that the Office of Sustainability in the 5 years that we've been in every year we seem to sort of feel like we redouble our efforts on this. This is an extremely difficult campus to share information with. We get bombarded with emails. There are so many good events in a day. Thank you all for coming, by the way. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the free lunch. But people want to know. People want to know what other people are doing so that they can either join in or not duplicate it. They want to know that they're part of and that they're contributing to these larger goals. And so we have a lot of ways that we work on this on campus to make this information more readily available, to educate and empower people, and to really expand the number of champions and that we have working on this. But it also matters what we say and who we say it to. So about this time in a talk is always when people are, it's a little lull. So I'm going to try to put up some nice, pretty pictures that Erin Finley helped pull together for a talk. So there's a lot of research out there that tells you how to get people's attention. What are they going to listen to? But more importantly, what's going to change their behavior? Carl knows a lot about this, probably knows more about this, so I'm going to keep my talk to a short part of this. But one of the things that you can do is work to get people's attention. This is an example from England where everybody knows the signs that tell you how fast you're going and, the different ways that they try to get your attention, but more importantly, get you to slow down. In the school district, they put a smiley face up, and they noticed a dramatic drop in the number of people speeding because the children who were in the car being driven to work were pestering their parents to slow down because they wanted to see the smiley face. Now, that's an ingenious way to get people's attention. I'm jumping straight to a pitfall because I think this is a pitfall that the environmental community has fallen for way too often, which is relying on fear, but doing so in a way where we haven't coupled those scary messages with the empowering ones and immediately sort of told people what to do. The idea is there's only so much we can worry about. You see this at work in all of the polls that say 80% of I'm making up the number, 80% of Americans think climate change is, a real peril, and 20% of them vote to say we should allocate money to do anything about it. It's because people, they worry about it, but some of the more immediate things can crowd things out. To me, it's unfortunate the tax day is right before Earth Day. You get people focused on those things. You want to always make sure you come in with what people can do about it. And the most common way you look at sort of framing the message is changing the default or taking advantage of this. I think we all may have heard about this, the idea with 401k plans, that you have such a low participation rate in 401k plans when the default is that you're not signed up for it. Another example is being an organ donor. There are countries in Northern Europe who have organ donation sign-up rates in the 80% because it's assumed that you will unless you say otherwise. So these are a couple of pictures of examples. The top one is a hotel room where you have to put your key in to get any of the electricity work. So your default is then that your lights are off when you leave. One of the other classic examples of this is that studies have shown that if you just move the healthy food to the front of the line in a cafeteria, people increase their consumption of healthy food by like 25% or something. You've just changed the default of this is the first thing that's in line. So I started with this to then, as an introduction to the behavior campaign that I mentioned. This is part of the energy management work that we did because sustaining a green campus requires having really good change management. So some of you have heard of the Energy Management Initiative. I just wanted to talk about the fact, kind of a recap, that within our CalCAP, which is our existing emission reductions goal, the strategic energy plan that I mentioned, we added on an energy office, financial incentives, where every unit on campus has a baseline. And come July, if they've used less than that baseline, they're going to get a check for that amount. And then in a year from now, if they're over, they'll have to pay for the difference. We have an outreach campaign that I'm going to talk more about, and an energy policy that's kind of the backbone behind all of this. So the outreach has a lot of different components. We have a website. We have downloadable tips, a dashboard that I'm going to talk a lot about, power agents that are, again, these champions that I talked about in the communication section, and then also surveys that then customize these tips to the individual buildings. The idea was we're going to tell people, here's your usage. We may be telling them that they're above the baseline, and they're going to go, well, what do I do about it? And the answer is part maybe infrastructure, where they might go to the energy office, but it's part behavioral, and that's where we wanted them to come to the My Power part of this, the outreach part, where we would help work them through customized ideas and hopefully see reductions in behavior, changes in behavior. So how many people have seen our dashboards? Wow, that's pretty good. Of course, some of you work for me, so. So if you haven't seen them, I'm going to show you a few of these. I didn't want to risk a live connection, although I'm sure the technology here in Cedar Jedi would be up for that task. But you can find them if you go to mypower.berkeley.edu and look under Find Your Building Dashboard. We have almost 70 buildings online at this point. We think it's one of the largest numbers, I think, in higher education at this point. The idea behind this was twofold. Obviously, we're wanting to share data on electricity use, but it's to make the point that energy isn't free, that different buildings use different amounts of electricity, and that what you do impacts how much electricity we use, and that you can see it when in a cumulative manner on these dashboards. So here's University Hall, taken last month. You can clearly see the Martin Luther King holiday. The two columns in gray are the gray day are always the weekend, So that next Monday was the holiday. It looks like fewer people worked on the holiday than did on the weekends at University Hall, which is probably a good thing. Again, for those of you who are familiar with energy, this is probably a very familiar energy use profile for an office building. It's relatively low at night, although I'm sure it could be lower. You know, ramps up at 8 o'clock. You can sometimes see a little dip at lunch, and then kind of drops back down at the end of the day in a fairly uniform and consistent manner. Looking at Doe Memorial Library, which is just another one I picked. This is a different view on the dashboard where you can see 3 months instead of a year. What's very clear here is the energy curtailment. This was when everybody was gone over the break, all the staff and the students were gone, and we went in and changed the schedules for the HVAC and put that and sort of knocked those back. And that's curtailment in action. And that's, we saved over $100,000, which was double what we had the year before, by doing that in more buildings around campus. When you zoom in a little bit more on Doe, it starts to look a little bit more interesting. It's not as smooth a usage as in an office building. It's not as regular. Some weeks are lower than others. And you can see some odd little spikes sort of going on. Like, I don't know what happened on January 6th, but a lot more people were in the library then using it. There can be a lot of different reasons for these spikes. And one of the things that we used this to do was what I referred to in that Barrows exhibit. When they recur, we want people to help the energy office notice it and do something about it, because sometimes it means something is amiss. So here's another example that I think that I really enjoy from Evans, which was, I hope you all can see this. So there's a little late night blip. I sort of call this the Evans mitten. It looks like a little thumb. Down here you can see that there's around 11 o'clock almost every night there was a little surge in electricity, and then a smaller one at 4 a.m. on some days. And that had persisted over a long period of time, and it actually took a while to figure out what was going on. Buildings are fairly complex. There can be a lot of things going on in them, especially when there's a lot of different departments doing a lot of different usage. And it ended up, I think, being related to cooling in a computer room. And so we said, let's just try not cooling it every day. And it was okay. They were concerned about the temperature in that server room. And so in future times, that mitten disappears. This was a smaller savings. Hopefully that's obvious, because this was something being on for a shorter period of time, being on for an hour of the day, maybe when it didn't need to be, as opposed to what was going on in Barrows, where it was on 24 hours a day. But we still saved about $2,000. But, so you've got these dashboards. They share out a lot of information. You've still got people to look at, people to look at them. You've got to get people's attention, like with the smiley face. And so we developed a series of posters. You're the only group that's not laughed when they see that. I even waited for you to laugh. I guess it's not that funny. Anyway, it gets some people's attention then. So we have a series of posters to grab people's attention, to draw them to the program, because we think humor is an effective tool, except when it's not. But it is a serious message that everyone has a role to play, and that small actions can add up to larger impacts. We have a whole set of these posters. Hopefully some of you have seen some of them around campus. If you want some from your building, you can email mypower@berkeley.edu to get some more. Again, we have 5 in total. We have a faculty member on one. I'll show them at the end. A lab setting and some students. So in closing, I opted not to return to the 70s because, it's a time of bad fashion and bad haircuts. But I wanted to instead look to the future and sort of think through what a vision might be in 5 to 10 years of what a green campus here at Berkeley might be. And there's a lot of different paths we can take, but some of the ways that I like to think about it is that we might be providing the lowest carbon education. Or perhaps that we might be kind of analogous to a Silicon Valley for sustainability, where UC Berkeley and the researchers and the faculty and the students, am I doing that? are viewed as the intellectual. We're the intellectual and operational sort of hub and center for sustainability. That everybody wants to do what we're doing. That people come here to learn how to do what we do. That our students are sought after for the skills and the education, the research and the experience that they've gotten here. That we're conducting the research that finds the solutions that others are wanting to implement. And so, in some less lofty words, that we've created a transparent and resilient community of sustainability here. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Lisa?
Hi. This might be a little specific, you may not know this, but you had this slide with water on it, and there was a picture of sprinklers running during the day. And I see this around campus a lot. I see sprinklers running during the day, and that seems like a big thing you could do, this water at night everywhere, because then you waste a lot of water through evaporation. Yeah. Is that something that's been considered or being done?
Well, hopefully we have a lot of the irrigation. We've been moving parts of the irrigation system. So it's not just one big system. There's zones, which I think is good from a maintenance point of view, working to move them onto a more automated system wherein we can set the time and it more accurately sort of irrigates when we want it to. But that is also connected to the weather system so that you don't irrigate while it's raining or just after it's rained. I think any system like this, as large of an area as it is, there are times when that doesn't work. And there are areas where we're still working to get that done. I know the West Circle is one of those areas where sometimes it gets overwatered. So if you see that, hopefully it's more because something has gone wrong than that it's something that happens all the time. It sounds to me like you know of some instances where they've happened all the time. Let me know. We can call it in and see if they can look into getting that fixed, because it is not a very efficient use of water.
Hi, very inspirational.
Thank you.
One question I had as a faculty member is, how do we gauge our students maybe in class projects that support the overall mission? Do you have any method to do that? I actually have one student group that's working on a project called Matches that tries to match up student projects with do-good projects in the Bay Area, including the Berkeley campus. So I don't know if there's something that your office can do working with this, or what ideas do you have?
Yeah. So I think to date we've been an ad hoc matchmaker in that sense. There have been times when we've had suggestions for projects that people can do. Oftentimes, some of the projects that we're working on in the office aren't timed right for the school semester. So it's more often a matter of sort of finding a related or a new project that does work in the semester time frame that you need to do. But we're always happy to try to brainstorm.
I would say that a lot of our most successful projects are ones that are ongoing.
Oh, okay. So
you establish, some important project, and then there's always the monitoring and the revision or the expansion. So I think they're almost better if they're multi-semester projects.
That's great. We haven't had exposure to those before, but that's great to know, and we would love to come up with more ideas for that. I think for a lot of the areas, there's a lot of observation and monitoring that isn't done by the dashboards, or that can be used to supplement that. Just for people who didn't hear the question, it was about having ongoing projects that covered multiple semesters that maybe had different students working on them. I think that's great. I would love to talk to you more about that.
I just am curious about the recycling on campus. I noticed that there are a lot of bins that are paper only that people throw all kinds of stuff into, and I've noticed that there aren't mixed recycling options in most classrooms and things like that. And I know that the city of Berkeley has kind of a terrible recycling system. What are you guys planning to do there for this? Because if you're planning to get zero waste by 2020, there's kind of a lot to do.
Yeah. Exterior bins are one of the most difficult areas to get segregation done right. It has not helped on campus that we have a mix of bins that are often not well labeled, so that every time you go up to one, even if you want to put it in the right place, you sometimes can't see. There's actually some of the ones that are out there that I can't read, because like with my reading glasses, I'd have to get too close, and if I'm further away, I can't read what it is. You may have noticed some new bins on Sproul Plaza. There's been a project underway funded through the Green Initiative Fund to design, and it was a design that worked with, I couldn't even name all of the different groups on campus, using some campus funds to come up with some better bins that are going to be both ergonomic, so that you don't that nobody hurts their back trying to pull the bin out, and meet a lot of other criteria. So I think there are is it 450 that are coming? It's either 250 or 450 that are going to be coming in the next few weeks, and the first 8 or so are in Sproul Plaza, and we're hoping to try to address some of those issues in the outdoor bins. The classroom is a different issue, and it's not been that a particular classroom that you've been in doesn't have a recycling bin. It's that we don't have bins, I think, in hardly any of them. And I think there's conversations underway to figure out what that is. A lot of that is due to the fact that there's no food allowed in most classrooms. And so it was a kind of an issue around that. So there's a long road ahead. There's a zero waste plan that's being developed right now that will be rolled out soon that's looking to break this down into all of those issues. So it looks at, bins and signage and education and outreach and participation and composting and purchasing, and lays out a more concrete plan for us in a lot of different areas. Again, trying to pull in all the partners that we're going to need to make that work. So fingers crossed. Okay. These lights are really hot.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. How is steam generated on campus?
That's a great question. Do you know where the steam plant is?
Thought I did.
The cogen plant, yes.
No, not really.
So it's near the baseball field. It's actually a fairly lovely building that I always sound snarky when I say this, that often has steam coming out of the top when there's a pressure regulated. So the campus has a cogeneration plant. So it's natural gas fired. These were cogeneration boilers that were put in 1987 that are supplemented with some older boilers to make sure that there's enough steam for campus. So the electricity, it's operated by a third party. They sell the electricity to the utility and sell us the steam. And then, but then the steam returns in the condensate loop. So once it's cooled down enough that it's returned to water, it comes back into the plant so that we gain some efficiencies both from generating both the electricity and the steam at the same time, but also having that water loop come back in. And I'm sure there's a lot of people here who are cringing at my explanation of that.
Just a follow-on question. So the steam is produced by natural gas. Then why is natural gas on your table so much lower in emissions?
It's an accounting protocol issue. A third party operates this for us, and so they have responsibility for the emissions in the form of the natural gas. We report them as the steam. So we just end up reporting them as steam instead of the natural gas because from a legal basis, we buy the steam, not the natural gas. So it's how they have us do the inventory. I think there's one other question. I don't know.
Sure. Oh, we're good on time.
This may be a little technical, but so in the cogen plant, are you kind of constrained by having to deliver a certain amount of electricity? And so do you have kind of artificially inflated steam bills because of that, or is that not always the case?
The operation of the steam and the contract of the cogen plant and the contract we have with that operator is a very complex issue, so I'm not sure I can actually answer that. You can imagine that those things are tied together and that it is unusual that they're selling the electricity to one party and the steam to another one. I think in theory, we asked them to manage the plant to deliver the steam that the campus needs. So, but you can't just sort of turn a steam boiler on and off. And so you have a lot of, there's some continuous use of steam, as there would be whether it was a cogeneration plant or not.
Other questions for Lisa?
You're getting your workout too.
I was just kind of curious how sustainable food's defined and what you guys can do when you're trying to get more of it. Like, what sort of strategies you do?
So it's actually a fairly long definition. It's in the UC policy on sustainable practices. It boils down to local, and for us that's within 250 miles approximately, organic, humane, and fair trade. And we're looking to keep that as things that are third-party certified. So it's a pretty broad definition. It does not include locally processed. So when Cal Dining makes their own breads or buys from a local bakery, that's not included in that particular definition. Other people do include that. It's something, we have a fairly high percentage relative to some schools who maybe don't live as close to farms like we do. We're very fortunate to be very close to some very good food. Cost can be an issue. Cal Dining has achieved the numbers that they've achieved, and they hit as high as 41% for the food that's in the dining halls. This number includes all their retail operations and other retail vendors on campus. And they've done that. They've achieved that amount without having to raise their cost. But they are at the point where you're looking at there's a wide price differential when UC Berkeley's cost of food and housing is fairly high. And so those are some of the trade-offs they're making, even though they've achieved, or more than achieved, the goal. So, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate this, and go be green.